Is the inheritance really canceled, Mom?
That was the first thing my eldest son said when I opened my eyes in that hospital bed. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Thank God you're alive." Just that. Cold, calculated, greedy as sin. I remember lying there, ribs screaming, tasting blood in my mouth, and thinking, so this is what I raised. This is what 92 years of sacrifice bought me. You want to know the twisted part? I wasn't even surprised. Let me back up. The push happened 3 days before that hospital scene in my own kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd baked 10,000 loaves of bread to keep those boys fed after their father died at sea. Michael, my firstborn, 68 years old and still throwing tantrums like a toddler, shoved me because I told him the truth. I was giving it all away. $10 million. Per son, gone, donated. Every last cent I'd bled for. His face went purple. "You can't do that. That money is ours." Ours, not mine. Ours. I watched his hand come up, watched it like you'd watch a slow-motion car crash, and then I was on the floor, my coffee mug exploding into porcelain shrapnel, my hip cracking against the tiles. The sound was awful, sharp and final, like something breaking that could never be put back together. But you know what? That sound woke me up, lying there on that cold kitchen floor, staring at the ceiling I'd scrubbed 1,000 times. I finally understood. I'd built this nightmare myself. Every envelope of cash instead of a hug. Every check instead of a conversation. Every, "Here's money, now leave me alone to work," instead of, "Sit down, let's talk." I'd taught them that love had a price tag, and now they were collecting. The ambulance came, the hospital admitted me, and when I woke up to Michael's vulture question about the inheritance, something crystallized inside me, something hard and bright and absolutely unforgiving. They thought I was a senile old woman they could bully into submission. They were about to learn otherwise. I smiled at Michael that day in the hospital, a smile that made him shift uncomfortably in his chair, and I said very quietly, "The donation stands. Every penny, you'll get nothing." The rage in his eyes was delicious. Because here's what my sons didn't know, what they couldn't possibly understand in their greed-soaked brains. I wasn't just taking away their inheritance. I was taking away the lie I'd lived by for 70 years, and in its place, I was going to leave them something far more valuable and infinitely more painful. The truth. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a 92-year-old woman with broken ribs and a broken heart took down 3 grown men who thought they owned her. Let me tell you about the recipe book, the lawyer, the courtroom, and the one son, just one, who understood what love actually means. Let me tell you how I got my revenge by learning to forgive myself. Trust me, by the time I was done, they wished they'd just taken the damn money. The hospital smelled like disinfectant trying to mask something rotten underneath. Fitting, really. That's exactly what my family had become. They kept me there for observation, broken ribs, possible concussion, something about monitoring an elderly patient after a fall. The nurses were kind. They'd fluff my pillows and ask if I needed anything, their voices soft and careful, the way you'd talk to someone fragile. I wasn't fragile. Not anymore. Michael came back the next morning with his brothers in tow. David, my middle son, wore his real estate developer suit like armor. Andrew, the youngest, hung back by the door, his music teacher's gentleness making him look out of place next to his brother's hard edges. They stood around my bed like vultures circling roadkill. Michael cleared his throat with that self-important rumble he'd perfected. "Mom, we need to discuss this rationally." Rationally. That's rich, coming from the man who'd shoved his 92-year-old mother onto a kitchen floor. "There's nothing to discuss," I said, my voice raspier than usual from the pain medication. "I've made my decision." David stepped forward, his jaw tight with that controlled anger he thought made him look professional. "You're not thinking clearly. The fall, obviously—" "Don't!" The word came out sharp enough to cut. "Don't you dare use my injuries as an excuse. Injuries you caused." Michael's face flushed red. "That was an accident, and you know it." An accident. Sure. The way a bullet is an accident when you pull the trigger. I looked at each of them, really looked. Michael with his expensive watch and cheaper soul. David with his spreadsheet eyes calculating every angle. And Andrew, sweet Andrew, who wouldn't meet my gaze. Tell me something, I said quietly, tasting copper in my mouth. When was the last time any of you asked how I was doing? Not my bank account, not my will, me. Silence, the kind that screams louder than words. The heart monitor beeped steadily beside me, counting seconds nobody wanted to fill. Finally, David tried a different tactic, his voice taking on that oily smoothness he used in business deals. We're worried about you, Mom. You're alone in that big house. You're not getting any younger. These decisions should involve the family. The family. I let the words hang there, bitter as old coffee. You mean the people who visit twice a year and call on birthdays? Sometimes? Michael's hands clenched into fists. I watched his knuckles go white and thought, there it is. There's the real you. We've been busy, he said through gritted teeth, building our lives, raising our families. You know how it is. I do know. My ribs throbbed with each breath, a physical reminder of exactly how well I knew. I know I spent 40 years building a business so you'd have everything. College educations, down payments on houses, bail money when you needed it. That last part made Michael flinch. Good. Let him remember. I know I worked 16-hour days and came home smelling like yeast and sweat. I know I missed school plays and baseball games because somebody had to pay the bills. My voice cracked, and I hated that weakness. I know I gave you everything except what you actually needed. Andrew finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Mom. I confused money with love, I continued, the words pouring out like blood from a wound. I thought if I just gave you enough, it would make up for the hugs I didn't give. The conversations we didn't have. The mother I was too tired to be. The machines around me beeped and hummed, marking time nobody wanted to acknowledge. So yes, I said firmly, meeting Michael's furious gaze head on. I'm giving it all away. Every last dollar, because maybe, just maybe, it'll force you to learn what I should have taught you from the beginning. And what's that? David demanded, his composure finally cracking. That love isn't something you inherit. It's something you earn. Michael exploded. This is insane. You're punishing us for what? For being successful? For living our own lives? For forgetting I'm still living mine? He turned and stormed out, his expensive shoes squeaking against the linoleum. David followed, shooting me a look that promised this wasn't over. The door swung shut with a pneumatic hiss that sounded like disappointment exhaling. Andrew stayed. He moved closer to the bed, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his shoulders rounded with something that looked like shame, or maybe sorrow. With Andrew, it was hard to tell. He'd always felt too much. I never wanted the money, he said softly, his teacher's voice steady despite the tremor underneath. I know. But I didn't stop them either. His eyes finally met mine and I saw guilt there. Real, raw, honest guilt. I should have visited more. Should have called, should have. Should have, could have, would have. I reached out with the hand that wasn't hooked to an IV. The past is written, Andrew. It's the future we get to choose. He took my hand gently like I might break. Maybe I already had. What do we do now? He asked. I thought about the recipe book sitting at home, about the note folded inside it, waiting all these years to be found, about the woman I'd been and the woman I was becoming, here in this sterile room that smelled like endings and beginnings all at once. Now, I said, squeezing his hand, we learn what forgiveness looks like. He nodded, but I could see the question in his eyes. Forgiveness for them or for yourself? Both, I thought, but I wasn't ready to say that out loud yet. What I didn't tell him, what I couldn't tell him, was that going home meant facing the one thing I'd been avoiding for 70 years. The truth hidden in flour-stained pages written in my dead husband's hand. And that truth was going to change everything. They released me 4 days later with a prescription for pain medication and instructions to take it easy. Take it easy. At 92, what else was there? Andrew drove me home in his old Subaru that smelled like coffee and sheet music. He didn't try to fill the silence with small talk, and I was grateful. The Maine coast rolled past my window. Gray water, grayer sky, houses that had weathered 100 winters just like me. When we pulled into my driveway, the house looked smaller than I remembered. Older. The white paint was peeling near the gutters, and the garden boxes I'd once kept full of herbs sat empty and weathered. "Want me to stay?" Andrew asked gently, his hand on the gear shift. "No." I touched his arm. "I need to do this alone." He understood. That's the thing about Andrew. He always understood the things that mattered. Inside, the house was exactly as I'd left it. The broken mug swept up, probably by Martha, my housekeeper. The kitchen floor still showed a faint stain where my coffee had spilled. I stood there for a long moment, feeling the ghost of that fall in my aching bones. The light through the window was the color of old honey. Dust motes drifted in the afternoon sun, and the whole place smelled like closed-up rooms and memories going stale. I made tea. My hands shook as I filled the kettle, and I had to grip the counter to steady myself. Getting old is humiliating in ways nobody warns you about. Every simple task becomes a negotiation with a body that's betraying you one joint at a time. The tea steeped. I carried it to the kitchen table, that same table where I'd fed 3 growing boys and never once asked them how they felt. Where I'd counted receipts and balanced books and convinced myself that providing was the same as loving. That's when I saw it. The recipe book. It sat on the shelf where it had lived for decades, spine cracked and faded, flour permanently ground into its corners. I'd used it every day for 40 years, and then one day I just stopped baking, stopped opening it, stopped remembering. My tea went cold as I stared at it. Finally, I stood, crossed the kitchen, reached up with shaking hands and pulled it down. The weight of it surprised me, not heavy exactly, but dense with years. The cover was water-stained and warped, held together more by habit than binding. I carried it back to the table like it might explode. The pages crackled when I opened them. My younger handwriting stared back at me, confident strokes in faded blue ink. Eleanor's honey wheat and Sunday cinnamon rolls, and Michael's favorite chocolate chip. Each recipe a small monument to a life I'd lived in, flour and butter and blind determination. I turned pages slowly, past breads and pastries and the dinner rolls I'd made every Thanksgiving, past annotations in the margins, add more salt, and bake 5 minutes longer, and the boys loved this. Then tucked between sourdough starter and basic white loaf, a piece of paper slipped out. My breath caught. The paper was thin, yellowed at the edges, folded in half. I recognized it immediately. The stationery from the Navy hospital where my husband had spent his last days. The paper they gave families to write final letters. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I unfolded it. His handwriting. Robert's handwriting, after 63 years. Still clear, still strong, despite the illness that had been eating him alive. My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry for that. Sorry for leaving you alone with 3 boys and a dream bigger than both of us. I know you'll work yourself to the bone. I know you'll sacrifice everything to give them a good life. That's who you are, my strong, stubborn, beautiful wife who never learned when to stop. But Eleanor, please hear me. Leave them the warmth of your heart, not just the taste of your bread. They'll need your time more than your money, your presence more than your presence, your love more than your labor. Don't let the work become the love. Don't let the giving become the gap between you. I wish I could stay to remind you, but I can't. So I'm leaving this here, in the place you'll spend the most time. Find it when you need it. Remember what matters. All my love, always. Robert. The paper blurred. Tears dropped onto words written when Eisenhower was president, when my hair was still brown, when I still believed I could do everything right if I just worked hard enough. I read it again. And again. Each word a small knife opening old wounds I'd pretended had healed. He'd known. Even then, dying in that hospital bed, he'd known exactly who I'd become, what I'd sacrifice, how I'd confuse exhaustion with devotion, and I'd never seen it. 63 years of baking from this book, and I'd never found his final message. "Oh, Robert," I whispered to the empty kitchen, my voice breaking on his name. "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." The afternoon light shifted, the house creaked its old house sounds, and I sat there holding a letter from a ghost, understanding finally, devastatingly understanding, that I'd spent 7 decades running from the very wisdom I'd needed most. Leave them the warmth of your heart, not just the taste of your bread. Too late for that now, wasn't it? My sons were grown. The damage was done. The distance between us measured in decades of money exchanged and conversations avoided. But then I thought about Michael's rage, David's cold calculation, Andrew's gentle sorrow. I thought about the inheritance they felt entitled to, the wealth they assumed was theirs by right of survival. And suddenly, I knew exactly what I had to do. If I'd spent 70 years giving them money instead of love, then I'd spend whatever time I had left giving them the only thing that could possibly matter now, the truth about what love actually costs. The recipe book lay open before me, Robert's letter trembling in my hands, and for the first time since the push, since the hospital, since waking up to my son's greed, I felt something that wasn't pain or regret. I felt purpose. What I was about to do would destroy them. But maybe, just maybe, destruction was the only path to rebuilding what should have been there all along. I reached for the phone to call my attorney. This was going to hurt. All of us. Good. Mr. Lawson arrived the next morning with his leather briefcase and his grandfather's pocket watch. He'd been handling my affairs for 20 years, ever since his father retired. Good man, honest, the kind who still said ma'am and meant it. He sat across from me at that same kitchen table, the recipe book pushed to the side, Robert's letter safely tucked back between its pages. "Mrs. Brooks," he began carefully, his lawyer's voice measured and calm, "I want to make absolutely certain you understand what you're asking me to do." "I understand perfectly." My tea had gone cold again, but I sipped it anyway. The Brooks Family Charitable Trust, everything. Scholarships for music students, grants for small businesses, food programs, community centers. Not $1 to my sons. He studied me with those sharp gray eyes that had seen plenty of family drama in his career. "They'll fight this. You know that. Let them. They'll claim undue influence, diminished capacity. They'll drag you through court." His tone was gentle but firm, like a doctor delivering bad news. "It won't be pleasant." I laughed, and it hurt my ribs. "Mr. Lawson, I spent 40 years feeding people who never said thank you. I raised 3 boys who visit twice a year and call me when they need money. One of them shoved me onto my own kitchen floor because I told him no." I met his gaze steadily. "I think I can handle unpleasant." He nodded slowly, pulling documents from his briefcase. "Then let's make sure this is ironclad." We spent 3 hours going through paperwork, every detail, every contingency, every legal shield that would protect my decision. By the time he left, my hand ached from signing, and my head throbbed from concentration, but it was done. The hard part came next. I called Michael first. The phone rang 4 times before he answered, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "What?" Not hello, not, "How are you feeling, Mom?" Just what? Like I was an inconvenience interrupting his important day. "I've made it official," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "The charitable trust. It's all filed, legal, final silence." "Then, you're making a mistake." "Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. We'll contest it." His words came out clipped and hard, each one a small threat. "You're not well. Everyone saw you in that hospital bed. Confused, medicated, not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in 70 years. This is vindictive, cruel. His voice rose, that familiar temper breaking through his businessman facade. After everything you what? I cut him off, surprised by my own sharpness. After everything you tolerated? Endured. Let me ask you something, Michael. When's the last time you visited because you wanted to see me, not because there was a holiday or a check involved? Another silence, colder than the first. That's what I thought. I took a breath, tasting the bitterness in my own mouth. You'll get the formal papers in a few days. I suggest you hire a good attorney. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. David called within the hour. His voice dripped with that false reasonableness he used when closing deals. Mom, Michael told me about your decision. I think we all need to sit down and talk about this like adults. There's nothing to discuss. Of course there is. Smooth as oil on water. You're upset. Hurt. We understand. But this isn't the answer. Family stays together. We work things out. Family. I let the word hang there between us, heavy with accusation. Is that what we are, David? Because it feels more like a corporation, and I'm the asset you're trying to liquidate. His composure cracked just slightly. That's not fair. Fair? My laugh was bitter. You want to talk about fair? I worked 16-hour days so you could go to college. I mortgaged my house so you could start your first development deal. I gave you everything, and you gave me quarterly visits and obligatory phone calls. We have lives, Mom. Families, responsibilities. So did I. The words came out quieter than I intended, weighted with years. And I sacrificed all of it for you. But sacrifice isn't the same as love, David. I'm finally learning that. This is insane, he said, his patience finally exhausted. You're throwing away millions out of spite. No, I corrected him softly. I'm giving away millions because spite would be keeping it and watching you circle like vultures until I die. He hung up on me. I wasn't surprised. They showed up together 2 days later, all three of them. Michael in his power suit, David with his real estate swagger, and Andrew, pale and uncomfortable, trailing behind like he'd been dragged there against his will. Martha let them in, then disappeared into the kitchen with a look that said she wanted no part of this. Smart woman. They stood in my living room, the room where they'd opened Christmas presents and tracked in mud and grew from boys into men, and they looked at me like I was the enemy. Michael spoke first, his voice hard and businesslike. We've consulted with an attorney. He says we have grounds to challenge the trust on the basis of mental incompetence. Is that so? I sat in my chair by the window, the afternoon light making them all shadows. And what makes you think I'm incompetent? Your age, David said flatly. The fall, the medications, the obvious emotional distress affecting your judgment. I see. I folded my hands in my lap, channeling every ounce of dignity I had left. And the fact that I'm making choices you don't like, that's evidence of incompetence? It's evidence you're not yourself, Michael insisted, leaning forward aggressively. The mother we know would never do this. You're right. The words came out sharp and clear. The mother you knew worked herself to death trying to buy your love. The mother you knew confused money with affection and checks with connection. That woman was a fool. Andrew flinched. Michael's jaw tightened. David just stared at me with calculating eyes. But that woman is gone, I continued, my voice gaining strength. And the woman sitting here now understands something crucial. I can't fix the past. Can't undo the damage. Can't give you back the mother you deserved. But I can stop perpetuating the lie that money equals love. This is our inheritance. Michael's composure finally shattered, his voice rising to a shout. Our right. We're your sons. Yes, I said quietly. You are. And that's exactly why I'm doing this. The look on his face was pure hatred, raw and undisguised. And in that moment, I saw exactly what I'd created. A man who valued dollars more than dignity, who measured love in zeros on a bank statement. Get out, I said, suddenly exhausted. All of you, get out of my house. "You'll regret this," David threatened, his voice cold as January ice. "Maybe." I met his eyes steadily. "But at least I'll regret something I chose, not something I avoided." They left in a storm of slammed doors and muttered threats, all except Andrew, who lingered in the doorway, his face twisted with something that looked like grief. "I tried to stop them," he said helplessly, his teacher's gentleness making the words almost painful. "I know. This isn't what I want. The money, the fighting, none of it. I know that too." He opened his mouth to say something else, then closed it. Finally, he just nodded and left, pulling the door shut gently behind him. The house fell silent. I sat there as the afternoon light faded to evening, feeling the weight of what I'd set in motion. They were going to fight me, drag me through courts and evaluations and public humiliation, try to prove I was senile, incompetent, not fit to make my own decisions. Let them try, because what they didn't understand, what they couldn't understand, was that I wasn't fighting for the money. I was fighting for the right to choose how my story ended, and this story was about to get a lot worse before it got better. The courthouse smelled like old wood and older secrets. I'd walked past it 1,000 times in my life, never imagining I'd end up inside fighting my own children for the right to be myself. Mr. Lawson met me on the steps, his briefcase in one hand, his other arm steady under mine as we climbed. My ribs had healed mostly, but stairs were still a negotiation. "Remember," he said quietly, his lawyer's voice calm and reassuring. "Stay composed. Answer only what's asked. Don't let them provoke you." "I'm 92, Mr. Lawson. I've survived worse than a courtroom." He smiled slightly. "Yes, ma'am. I believe you have." Inside, the courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, high windows, that particular hush that comes when serious things are about to happen. Michael and David sat at the plaintiff's table with their attorney, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit who looked like she ate grandmothers for breakfast. Andrew wasn't there. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. The judge was a woman in her 60s, iron gray hair pulled back severely, eyes that had seen every trick in the book. Judge Morrison. I'd read about her, fair but firm, intolerant of nonsense. Good, I had no nonsense to offer. Their attorney started strong, painting me as a confused elderly woman suffering from grief and medication-induced delusions. She cited my age, the fall, the hospital stay, made it sound like I was one step from drooling into my oatmeal. "Mrs. Brooks has experienced significant trauma," she said smoothly, her voice full of false concern. "A violent fall resulting in serious injuries. She's on multiple medications, living alone, isolated. It's clear her judgment has been compromised. She called a doctor to the stand, some specialist they'd hired who'd never met me, but had plenty of opinions about elderly cognitive decline. He used words like diminished capacity and age-related deterioration, with the confidence of someone who'd memorized a textbook. Then Michael testified. He sat in the witness box looking appropriately concerned, his face arranged in an expression of wounded devotion. The performance would have been impressive if I hadn't known the truth underneath. "My mother has always been strong-minded," he said with convincing sadness, "but lately she's been different. Paranoid, accusatory, making wild claims about our relationship." "What kind of claims?" their attorney prompted gently. "She says we don't love her, that we only care about money." His voice caught perfectly. It's heartbreaking. "We visit regularly, call often, but nothing we do seems to reach her anymore." I watched this fiction unfold with a strange detachment. Was this what my son had become? A man so comfortable with lying that he could manufacture tears on demand? David testified next, backing up Michael's story with cold precision. They'd rehearsed this, coordinated their narrative like a business presentation. Paint the crazy old lady, discredit her choices, take control of her assets, simple, clean, cruel. Then it was my turn. Mr. Lawson helped me to the stand. My legs shook, but I made it. Raised my right hand, swore to tell the truth. sat down in that hard wooden chair, and faced my sons across the courtroom. Their attorney approached me with predatory sympathy. "Mrs. Brooks, I know this must be difficult for you." "Not particularly," I said clearly. She blinked, thrown off script already. "You're not distressed by these proceedings?" "I'm distressed that my sons value money more than truth, but I'm not surprised." Her smile tightened. "Mrs. Brooks, you're 92 years old. You live alone. You recently suffered a serious fall. Don't you think perhaps your sons are right to be concerned about your decision-making abilities?" "My age doesn't make me incompetent. It makes me experienced. But the fall was caused by my eldest son shoving me onto my kitchen floor because I told him he wasn't getting his inheritance." The courtroom went very quiet. "That's in the hospital report if you'd care to check." Michael's face flushed red. David stared straight ahead. Their attorney recovered quickly. "Mrs. Brooks, you claim your son pushed you, but the hospital records indicate you told the staff you tripped." "I lied to protect him." My voice stayed steady. "Mothers do that, even for sons who don't deserve it." She changed tactics, her voice taking on a concerned softness. "You're donating $30 million to charity. That's your entire estate. Don't you think your children, who've been part of your life for decades, deserve some consideration?" "They've had my consideration for 70 years. Every dollar I earned went to them. Every hour I worked was for them. I gave them everything except what they needed most." "And what was that?" "A mother who knew the difference between providing and loving." The words hung in the air like smoke. "Mrs. Brooks," she pressed, sensing weakness, "isn't this decision really about anger? Revenge? Punishing your sons for perceived slights?" I looked at her directly. "No, it's about finally understanding what my husband tried to tell me 60 years ago. That love isn't measured in bank statements. That the warmth of your heart matters more than the size of your wallet. That I failed my boys by teaching them to value the wrong things." "So you're admitting your judgment was flawed?" "My judgment was flawed for 70 years, I said quietly. It's only now, at 92, that I'm finally seeing clearly." Mr. Lawson called his own expert, a psychologist who'd actually evaluated me. She testified calmly about my mental acuity, my clear understanding of my finances, my capacity to make informed decisions. "Mrs. Brooks is sharper than most people half her age," she said with professional certainty. "She understands exactly what she's doing and why. This isn't confusion, it's conviction." Then Mr. Lawson called me back to the stand. "Mrs. Brooks," he said gently, "why are you donating your estate to charity instead of leaving it to your sons?" I took a breath. This was it, the moment of truth. "Because I spent my whole life confusing money with love. I worked myself to exhaustion and wrote checks instead of having conversations. I thought if I just gave them enough, they'd know I cared." My voice cracked slightly. "But all I taught them was that love has a price tag. That family is a transaction. That mother is a bank, not a person." The courtroom was silent enough to hear breathing. My youngest son, Andrew, he's the only one who understood. He never asked for money, just time, just presence, just me. Tears blurred my vision, but I kept going. The others learned what I taught them. That's my failure, not theirs. And the only way I can possibly make it right is to stop. Stop perpetuating the lie. Stop letting money stand in for love. "So this donation," Mr. Lawson said softly, "is your way of teaching them a different lesson?" "No." I shook my head. "It's too late for lessons. This is my way of finally being honest. With them, with myself, about what matters." Michael stood up abruptly, his face twisted with rage. "This is insane. You're destroying our family over some self-righteous—" The judge's gavel cracked down. "Mr. Brooks, sit down." He sat, but the hatred in his eyes was pure and undisguised. Judge Morrison looked at me for a long moment. Then she looked at my sons, then at the stack of papers and testimony and expert opinions. "I'll render my decision in 1 week," she said formally, her voice carrying the weight of law. "Court is adjourned." The gavel fell again. Mr. Lawson helped me up. My sons pushed past us without a word, their attorney already talking strategy in urgent whispers. Outside, the main air was cold and clean. I breathed it in deeply, feeling lighter despite everything. "You did well," Mr. Lawson said quietly. "Did I?" "You told the truth. That's all we can do." I nodded, but I wasn't sure. Truth has a cost, and I was about to find out exactly how expensive honesty could be. What I didn't know then, what I wouldn't learn until the judge's decision came down, was that truth, like bread, needs time to rise. And some rises take longer than others. The week waiting for the judge's decision stretched out like taffy. Hours that felt like days. Days that felt like years. Time moves differently when you're old and waiting for something that might destroy what's left of your family. I spent most of it alone. Martha came by to clean, but even she seemed uncertain what to say. She'd dust the same shelf 3 times, glancing at me with worried eyes, finally settling on safe topics like the weather and the price of groceries. The phone didn't ring. Not once. That silence was louder than any argument we'd had. It filled the house like smoke, seeping into corners, settling on furniture, making every room feel smaller and colder. I'd sit in my chair by the window watching the bay. The water was gray most days, churning with October storms. Sometimes I'd see families walking the beach, parents and children, laughing, holding hands, being the kind of family I'd never managed to build. At night, the house made its settling sounds. Creaks and groans, pipes ticking, wind whistling through gaps I'd never gotten around to fixing. Sounds that used to feel like company, but now just emphasized how alone I was. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning, that dead hour when all your mistakes come visiting. Lie there in the dark, thinking about all the moments I'd missed. School plays I'd been too tired to attend. Baseball games I'd skipped because the diner needed me. Birthday parties where I'd shown up late with store-bought cake instead of the homemade ones they really wanted. Every choice made sense at the time. Every sacrifice felt necessary, but add them up over 70 years and they equal one thing: 3 sons who learned that money was how you showed love. And whose fault was that? Mine. All mine. On the 4th day, I pulled out Robert's letter again, read it in the thin afternoon light, his words still sharp after all these years. Leave them the warmth of your heart, not just the taste of your bread. I tried, I whispered to the empty room, to the ghost of a husband who'd known me better than I knew myself. I just didn't know how. The recipe book sat on the table where I'd left it. I opened it slowly, turning pages I'd once memorized. Each recipe was a map of my life. The breads I'd perfected, the pastries that paid for college, the dinner rolls that kept the lights on. But nowhere in those flour-stained pages was a recipe for love. No instructions for how to raise boys into men who valued connection over cash. No measurements for affection. No baking time for trust. I'd followed the wrong recipe all along. On the 5th day, Martha found me crying at the kitchen table. She didn't say anything at first. Just put the kettle on and made tea the way I liked it, strong and black with 1 sugar. Set it in front of me and sat down across the table. "You did what you had to do," she said finally, her voice carrying the weight of 20 years working in this house. "Don't you doubt that." Did I? My voice came out raw. Or did I just take the easy way out? Work instead of talk, money instead of time. Martha's hands wrapped around her own mug, weathered and strong from decades of cleaning other people's homes. "Mrs. Brooks, I've worked for a lot of families. Rich ones, poor ones, everything in between. And you know what I learned?" I looked up at her through blurred vision. "Love isn't about what you give. It's about what you see." She spoke slowly, choosing words carefully. "Some parents see their children, really see them, who they are, what they need. Most don't. They see what they want to see, or what's convenient to see." "I didn't see them at all," I whispered. "I just saw problems to solve, needs to meet, bills to pay." "Maybe not." Martha's voice was gentle but firm. "But you're seeing now. At 92, you're finally seeing. That counts for something." "Does it? When it's too late?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "My mama used to say it's never too late to do the right thing." Might be too late to fix what's broken, but never too late to stop breaking it worse. I let those words settle into me like warmth. They hate me now, I said softly. Some of them, maybe. Martha squeezed my hand. But hate comes from hurt. And hurt means they cared enough to be disappointed. Is that supposed to be comforting? She smiled sadly. No, just true. We sat there while the tea went cold and the afternoon light faded. Two old women who'd spent their lives working, surviving, making do, understanding each other in the way only people who've lived through hard things can understand. On the seventh day, Mr. Lawson called. "The judge is ready," he said simply, his lawyer's voice giving nothing away. "Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. My heart hammered against my ribs. Did she say Israel? Nothing, just that she's ready to deliver her ruling. I hung up and sat in the growing darkness of my living room. Tomorrow I'd find out whether I had the right to control my own life or whether my sons could take even that away from me. The house settled around me with its familiar sounds, the refrigerator humming, the clock ticking, the wind pushing against windows that had weathered 90 Maine winters. I thought about calling Andrew, just to hear a kind voice, just to remember that not everything I'd done had been wrong, but I didn't. Some things you have to face alone. This was one of them. That night, I dreamed of the bakery, the old Eleanor's kitchen that had been my prison and my pride. I was young again, strong again, kneading dough with flour-dusted hands. The boys were small, playing in the corner, laughing. In the dream, I stopped working, put down the dough, walked over and sat with them. Just sat, just watched them play. Just was present in a way I'd never managed in real life. Michael looked up at me and smiled, a real smile, open and trusting and full of love. "Mom," he said in his little boy voice, "will you play with us?" And in the dream, I said yes. I woke up with tears on my face and dawn breaking cold and gray over the bay. Today I'd find out if choosing myself, finally, at 92, choosing myself, would cost me everything. Or if maybe, just maybe, it would be the first real thing I'd given my sons in 70 years. The truth, even if the truth destroyed us all. I got dressed slowly, black dress, pearl earrings Robert had given me on our 10th anniversary, comfortable shoes for the courthouse steps. In the mirror, I looked every one of my 92 years. Face lined with decades of work and worry, eyes that had seen too much and understood too late. But underneath all that wear and tear, I saw something else. Clarity. For the first time in my long life, I knew exactly who I was, what I'd done wrong, what I was trying to make right, and nobody, not my sons, not their lawyers, not even a judge, could take that away from me. I picked up Robert's letter one more time. Read the words that had waited 63 years to change everything. "I'm doing it your way now," I whispered to him, to the memory of the man who'd loved me despite my stubborn blindness. Better late than never, right? The house was silent, but it felt like he heard me anyway. Mr. Lawson's car pulled up at 8:30. Time to face the verdict. Time to find out if truth and clarity and doing the right thing too late were enough. Time to find out what forgiveness actually costs and whether I could afford to pay it. Judge Morrison's voice was steady and clear, cutting through the thick silence of the courtroom like a knife through warm butter. After careful consideration of all evidence and testimony, this court finds that Eleanor Brooks is of sound mind and fully capable of making informed decisions regarding her estate. The words hung in the air. Michael's face went white. David's jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. Their attorney started gathering papers with sharp, angry movements. "The Brooks Family Charitable Trust stands as legally valid and binding," Judge Morrison continued, her gray eyes sweeping the courtroom. "Mrs. Brooks has every right to dispose of her assets as she sees fit. This court will not interfere with that right." The gavel came down, final, done, I'd won. But it didn't feel like winning, it felt like watching something die. Michael and David left without looking at me. Didn't say goodbye, didn't acknowledge my existence. Just walked out with their attorney, their backs rigid with rage and humiliation. The courtroom emptied quickly. Mr. Lawson squeezed my shoulder gently. "You did it, Mrs. Brooks. Your wishes will be honored." "Thank you," I managed, but my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. He helped me down the courthouse steps into the cold October morning. The sky was that peculiar gray that promises rain without delivering it. Trees along the street had lost most of their leaves, standing skeletal and bare. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we execute the trust, set up the scholarships, the community programs, everything you wanted." He paused. "And you try to live your life, Mrs. Brooks. That's all any of us can do. Live my life. At 92, with broken family ties and the weight of 7 decades of mistakes pressing down on my chest. Sure, simple. Mr. Lawson drove me home. The house looked exactly as I'd left it. Same peeling paint, same empty garden boxes, same windows reflecting gray sky. But it felt different somehow. Emptier. Like winning had hollowed it out. I spent the afternoon in my chair by the window, watching the bay churn and thinking about nothing. My mind felt scraped clean, too exhausted for regret or triumph. Martha came by around 3 with groceries and concern written all over her face. "How'd it go?" "I won." She studied me carefully. "Then why do you look like you lost?" "Maybe because winning and losing aren't as different as we think." She didn't argue, just put the groceries away and made tea I didn't drink. The next 2 days passed in a fog. I moved through the house like a ghost haunting my own life. Ate because Martha insisted. Slept because there was nothing else to do. The phone didn't ring. Nobody came. The silence grew heavier, more suffocating, until I felt like I was drowning in it. On the 3rd day after the verdict, someone knocked on my door. I almost didn't answer. What was the point? Michael and David had made their position clear, and anyone else could wait until I felt more human. But the knocking continued, gentle, persistent, patient. Finally, I dragged myself to the door and opened it. Andrew stood on my porch holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face drawn with exhaustion. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. We stared at each other for a long moment. The wind picked up, rustling the flowers in his hand, carrying the salt smell of the bay. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have come sooner. Should have stood with you. Should have—" "Stop." The word came out sharper than I intended. "Stop should having. I've done enough of that for both of us." His mouth quirked in a sad, almost smile. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He entered like he was walking into a church, reverent and careful. We sat at the kitchen table, that same table where so much had broken. The flowers lay between us, drops of color against worn wood. "Michael and David aren't speaking to me either," he said after a long silence. "They think I should have tried harder to change your mind. Should have been more persuasive." "Would you have? If I'd asked you to?" He looked at me directly, his music teacher's eyes honest and clear. "No, it was your choice to make. Your life, your money, your decision." Something in my chest loosened slightly. "Thank you." "I didn't come for thanks, Mom." He reached across the table, his hand trembling slightly. "I came because I wanted you to know something. Something I should have said years ago but was too scared to say." I took his hand. It was warm and solid and real. "Your love has always been enough," he said simply, his voice breaking on the words. "Not the money, not the gifts, not the checks or the help with down payments or any of it. Just you, just having you. That was always enough." Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. Hot and fast and full of 70 years of grief I'd never let myself feel. "I'm sorry," I choked out. "I'm so sorry I didn't know that. Didn't see it. Didn't—" "You were doing your best." His grip tightened on my hand. "It wasn't the right best. But it was all you knew. And now you're trying to do better. That's more than most people manage." We sat there crying together, 2 people who'd spent too long not saying what needed to be said. Finally, Andrew wiped his eyes and laughed shakily. I brought you flowers. That's what you're supposed to do when you visit someone who's been through hell. I looked at the wildflowers, asters and goldenrod, Queen Anne's lace and black-eyed Susans, the kind that grow wild along main roadsides. Simple, honest, real. They're perfect, I whispered. They reminded me of you. His smile was gentle, tougher than they look, beautiful because they survive. That broke something open inside me, some final wall I'd been holding up. I don't know how to fix this, I admitted, my voice raw with exhaustion. The family, the damage, any of it. Maybe you can't. Andrew's honesty was almost painful. Maybe some things stay broken, but that doesn't mean you stop trying to be better, to do better with whatever time you have left. I'm moving to Silver Bay, I said suddenly, the decision forming even as I spoke it. The retirement community. I can't stay here anymore. Too many ghosts. He nodded slowly. When? Soon. Next month, maybe, after I get things settled. Want help packing? The offer was so simple, so kind, so utterly unexpected that I couldn't speak. Just nodded. He stayed for dinner. We heated soup from Martha's groceries and ate quietly, comfortable in the silence. Not the suffocating silence of the past few days, but something softer, companionable. Before he left, he hugged me carefully, mindful of my still healing ribs. I'll come visit you at Silver Bay. Every week, I promise. You don't have to. I want to. He pulled back, his eyes fierce with a determination I'd never seen before. Michael and David can hate you if they want. That's their choice. But you're still my mother, and I'm not going anywhere. After he left, I put the wildflowers in water. They looked cheerful on the kitchen windowsill, bright against the gathering darkness outside. I sat at the table with Robert's letter, reading it one more time by lamplight. Leave them the warmth of your heart, not just the taste of your bread. I think, I whispered to him, to the flowers, to the empty house that wouldn't be mine much longer. I think I finally understand. Not all of my sons would forgive me. Maybe none of them fully would. But I'd done what I could, told the truth, chosen honesty over comfort, given them the only real inheritance I had left to give. The truth about who I was, who they'd become, and what love actually costs. And Andrew, my quiet, kind, overlooked youngest, had given me something in return. Hope. That maybe, just maybe, some broken things could learn to live with their cracks. That maybe redemption wasn't about fixing everything. Just about being honest about the damage. And that was going to have to be enough. Because in 2 weeks, I'd leave this house behind and start over one final time. At 92, I was about to learn what it meant to truly let go. Silver Bay Retirement Community sits on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic. Not fancy, but dignified. The kind of place where people go to finish their stories with whatever grace they can manage. I moved in on a Tuesday in November. Cold and clear, the kind of day that makes everything sharp-edged and honest. Andrew helped me pack. We spent 3 days sorting through 92 years of accumulated life, photographs and dusty albums, clothes I hadn't worn in decades, kitchen equipment from Eleanor's kitchen that I'd never use again. Most of it went to charity. Seemed fitting. The only thing I insisted on keeping was the recipe book. Andrew wrapped it carefully in tissue paper, his hands gentle as he placed it in my moving box. "You sure you want this?" he asked quietly. "Might be easier to start fresh." "I'm 92, I said with a small smile. Fresh isn't really an option anymore, but honest? That I can do. My apartment at Silver Bay is small. 1 bedroom, a kitchenette I'll probably never use, a living room with a sliding door to a tiny balcony. The furniture is simple, comfortable chair, small table, bed that's easier to get in and out of than my old one. The view, though, the view is everything. From my balcony, I can see the ocean stretching out forever. Gray some days, blue on others, green when storms roll in, always moving, always changing, never apologizing for what it is. I spend most of my time there now, in my chair, coffee cooling in my hand, watching the water. The other residents are kind. There's Margaret, who talks too much about her grandchildren. Harold, who plays chess in the common room and never wins. Betty, who walks the halls at night because dementia has stolen her sense of time. We're all here for the same reason, running out of pages in our stories, trying to make the last chapters mean something. Andrew visits every Thursday like clockwork, brings flowers, sits with me. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we don't. Both are fine. Last week he brought his guitar and played for me. Old songs, folk music, the kind of stuff he teaches his high school students. His voice is gentle, untrained but honest. "You're good at this," I told him when he finished. "Music?" He smiled. "Yeah, it's the one thing I got right." "No." I looked at him steadily. "Being a good person. That's what you got right." His eyes filled up, but he didn't look away. "I learned from watching you make mistakes." "That's a kind of teaching, too." Smart boy. Man, 58-year-old man who still looks like my baby when he smiles. Michael and David haven't contacted me. Not once in 3 months. I don't expect them to. Sometimes at night I lie in bed and think about them as children. Michael with his serious face and careful questions. David with his need to organize everything, line up his toys in perfect rows. The boys they were before I taught them the wrong lessons. I wonder if they ever think about me, if they miss me, if they hate me completely or just mostly. I wonder if it matters. Martha writes me letters, actual letters on paper, the kind nobody writes anymore. She tells me about the house. New people bought it, a young family with 3 kids. They're painting it yellow, she says, planting a garden. Good. It should be full of life again, full of children and noise and second chances. Yesterday I got a letter from Mr. Lawson. The first scholarship from the Brooks Family Charitable Trust has been awarded. A girl from Cape Haven High School. She plays violin and wants to study music education. Her name is Sophie. She wrote me a thank you note. Said the scholarship changed her life. Said she'd always wanted to teach music but thought she couldn't afford college. I cried reading it. Good tears this time. Maybe that's what redemption looks like. Not fixing what you broke, but helping someone else build something better. This morning I sat on my balcony and opened the recipe book. Haven't looked at it much since moving here. Too many memories, too much regret baked into every page. But today felt different. Clearer somehow. I found Robert's letter tucked where I'd left it. The paper is fragile now, soft from being read and reread. His handwriting's still strong despite the years between us. Leave them the warmth of your heart, not just the taste of your bread. "I'm trying," I whispered to him, to the wind, to the vast, indifferent ocean. Better late than never, right? The sun was setting. It does that spectacularly here, turns the whole sky gold and pink and purple, colors that seem impossible but exist anyway. I thought about my sons, about the life I'd lived, about all the choices that seemed right at the time and turned out wrong, about how you can't undo the past, but you can stop letting it write your future. "Mrs. Brooks?" A voice behind me. Betty, the one with dementia, standing in my doorway looking confused. "Do you know where I am?" "Silver Bay," I said gently. "You live here. Your room is down the hall. 3rd door on the left." She nodded slowly. "Will you walk with me?" I forget sometimes. "Of course." I stood, my joints protesting like they always do now. Took Betty's arm. We walked slowly down the corridor, her holding on to me like I was an anchor. "You're kind," she said softly. "Not really. Just old enough to know better." We found her room. I made sure she was settled, then walked back to my own apartment. The sun had dipped lower. The ocean was turning from gold to copper to that deep purple that comes just before darkness. I sat back down with my coffee and Robert's letter, and for the first time in 92 years, I felt something close to peace. Not happiness exactly, not joy, but something quieter and deeper. The knowledge that I'd finally done one honest thing, made one choice that wasn't about fear or obligation or trying to buy love with dollar signs. I told the truth, about myself, about my failures, about what I'd done wrong, and maybe that wouldn't heal my family, Maybe Michael and David would hate me forever. Maybe I'd die here with only Andrew and Martha and the ocean for company. But I'd die honest, and that would have to be enough. The recipe book lay open on my lap. I looked at the recipes I'd followed so faithfully. All those measurements and instructions, believing if I just followed them exactly, everything would turn out right. But life isn't a recipe. Love isn't something you can measure in cups and teaspoons. Family isn't a baking time you can set on a timer. It's messier than that. Harder, more uncertain, and I'd spent 70 years pretending it wasn't. The sky deepened to indigo. Stars began appearing, tiny pinpricks of light in the vast darkness. I thought about Sophie, the scholarship girl who'd written me that letter, about the warmth in her words, about how something I'd done, finally at the end of everything, had helped someone build a future. Maybe that's what legacy actually means. Not what you leave your children in a will, but what you leave behind in the world. Small acts of kindness, honest choices, truth told even when it costs everything. I understand now, I said to Robert to the night to myself. It took me 92 years and losing almost everything, but I finally understand. Love isn't what you give, it's what you leave behind. Not money, not things, not even time necessarily. Just warmth, just truth. Just the honest shape of who you really were. My bread will be forgotten. The diner is gone. The house belongs to strangers. But maybe, just maybe, someone will remember that I tried. That at the end, when it mattered most, I chose honesty over comfort. Truth over convenience. That I finally learned what my husband tried to teach me 63 years ago. The ocean breathed in and out below me. Eternal, indifferent, beautiful. And I sat there in my small chair on my small balcony at the edge of the vast Atlantic, holding a recipe book and a letter from a ghost, feeling more at peace than I had any right to feel. Free. Finally, impossibly, completely free. And that right there was enough.